Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Success After Trauma, where we bring in special guests that share their story, what they went through, and where they had that aha moment. They created that shift. They went on their journey and what it was like in healing, and then how they're giving back today. Today's guest is Laine Liberti, and I'm really excited to have Laine on here. It's a topic that is near and dear to my heart based on the traumas that I experienced and the mistakes that I've been learning that I've made in parenting. Laine Liberti is a best-selling author, an international speaker, a teen mentor, a world schooler, which I had to ask her what that was, and you guys are going to learn here in a minute. Partnership parenting paradigm advocate and mother. In 2012, Laine co-founded Project World School with her son and has lived in communities with over 100 teens in over 20 international locations. Laine founded Transformative Mentoring for Teens in 2020 in response to the growing need to support teens' mental health. Laine released her first book in 2022 called Seen, Heard, and Understood: Parenting and Parenting with Teens for Greater Mental Health. #1 best-selling on Amazon in parenting new releases. Laine is also a community leader and alternative education advocate, and often credited with spearheading the thriving world schooling movement. Laine, now I have had the privilege of hearing when you shared with me world schooling. When we connected the first time, I was like, you got to tell me. I couldn't. It was hard to even kind of grasp. My mind went to, we're going to be learning from, like I was thinking like we're learning different cultures, and that was kind of part of it. But would you tell everyone that listening what world schooling is and kind of how you came about that?
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to give you the definitions of world schooling, and part of the passion that I have behind the voice and speaking these words is I really wanted world schooling and the world schooling community to be inclusive. So there are many ways to world school, and we're going to take a look at first the educational aspect, and then we'll look at the travel aspect. And both are a wide range of variables. So from an educational perspective, world schooling is indeed learning from the world around you. And that's pretty simple. What does that mean, though? It means that we're using the outer world as a way to inspire curiosity to dig deeper. Now, for those people that are traveling, it's really easy to do because you find yourself outside of your comfort zone in new environments. And a normal, brain will ask questions like, why is this here? Who built this? Who lives here? Why do they do things in this way and not that way? Why do they speak this language? Where did they come from? All of those questions inspire learning in some way. So you can do this in the world at large, or you can do this in your home environment. So world schooling doesn't just mean travel. Now, those that do travel, however, tend to dominate the world schooling community in one way or another. And I'll talk about traveling in just a second. But from an educational perspective, again, it's learning from the world around us. Now, there are families that supplement this learning with curriculum, and they use homeschooling curriculum or even state-supplied curriculum based on the child's age or school district or whatever so they're sticking with their home country's system. Some do not. There are those that, like my family, we used zero curriculum and we were completely 100% self-directed. And that's another way to world school. And also we include things like families that move to new cultures or new countries for whatever reason, and they enroll their children into schools in a foreign country. Well, that's world schooling too, because you're hyper aware of the differences and the similarities and the cultural influences. And every country that you go to has its own cultural traditions, and that's integrated into world schooling, because you can't help but to be affected by that if you're living in another community or culture or country. So that's world schooling. Or if you are simply vacationing and taking time from your home country and doing a trip, if the intentionality behind it is to experience the culture and learn, then that is world schooling too. Also, the final world schooling sort of exposure to different cultures and cultural beliefs and traditions and so forth is by hosting people from other countries and really learning from your guests and having that cultural exchange in your home community. And to expand on that, you don't have to leave your home country. You could immerse yourself in, food from another culture and
Video.
arts and dance and all sorts of stuff. And then within our community too, I said that the other aspect is the travel aspect. So I did touch on like the vacationers. Sure, you're a world schooler if you're intentional about the learning. You can travel nonstop and live nomadically like we did. That's world schooling. You could have a limited amount of time that you travel every year. That's world schooling. You could move to another country and live there, for a period of time and go deep instead of wide. That's world schooling. So there's a lot of different sort of variables, but they're all world schooling. And if you ever have been exposed to this term and somebody said to you, you're doing it wrong, well, they're wrong, because world schooling is as diverse as this planet is. So there's no one way to do it.
I love it. I love it. Now, did you so the term world schooling is fresh to me through
Yeah.
you, Lainey. Concept totally get it, and very well, very sound. So did the concept, like, people have been exploring, but
Yeah.
did the concept and the terminology world schooling, like, did you kind of create that as a concept, or was that around and you're like, hey, I like that, I want to get into it, and then you've evolved it since you got into it?
Sort of the second one. However, travelers, which I was a part of a traveling community of families, and originally we started off as, quote unquote bloggers, and that's what brought us together. And nobody was using the term world schooling. Now there's an educational modality, if you will, and it was coined by John. What's his last name? I'm totally blanking on his last name. It'll come to me like mid-sentence in like 20 minutes, I promise. John Holt. Hey, I didn't even have to wait.
There you go.
So he was an advocate in the 70s for natural learning, and he was voted the school teacher of the year in New York many times over. And he noticed that the education system was not really serving children, and he started to advocate and facilitate learning outside of the classroom and started to call it unschooling. And it was a great word for the 70s. And there was an interview with John Holt where he talks about one of the ad campaigns in the 70s from 7-Up, I believe it was. And their ad campaign was, it's the Uncola, because everybody was drinking, dark colored soda. So it was the uncola. So it was still a thing, but it was the lack of the thing. And so he coined the term unschooling, as meaning living without school and living outside of that whole paradigm. And many people for 30, 40, 50 years use that term. And when we started to travel, I had never heard the term before, but about 8 months into our travels, and I could talk a little bit about partnership parenting and all that stuff in a little bit. But one of the roads that brought us on our journey was my son really wanted to continue traveling. And we knew we were originally planning on traveling for, 1 year. And well, that was in 2009. Well, we're recording this in 2023 and we haven't stopped yet. So we've been at it for quite a long
It's
time.
been a long year.
Oh boy, that's the longest year of my life. And I wish the birthdays didn't keep going.
We're still in 1 year. Hold on.
It was a 1 year plan. But
Yeah.
so when I discovered, like a year in or 8 months in, that we were going to keep doing this forever, I really had to look at what educational options were there. Because when we left the States, my son, he was 9, and he asked me, do I have to go to school? And I said, no. Intuitively, I knew that 1 year of travel would be way more than 5th grade could ever offer him. But once it became like we're doing this indefinitely, like as the responsible parent, I had to say, well, how are we actually addressing education? And when I discovered this thing called unschooling, I recognized that it is learning in partnership, it's facilitated learner, it's learner, interest led. It's a lot of things. There's something called strewing in what is the word I'm looking for? The pedagogy, if you will. It's kind of like an unpedagogy, because pedagogy is like the system and method of learning. Well, this is like an unpedagogy, but the fact that we're using that term means that there is an actual science behind it, that we are naturally learning, and it's intrinsically motivated learning and all of that stuff. But as soon as we discovered that this thing was a thing and we were already doing it and we were enjoying learning and we were learning deep things because it was in context, we decided that, oh my gosh, we're already doing this. We're unschoolers. And as time went on, I didn't like using the term unschooler, because as we were traveling, people were asking me, what are you doing? And it sounded like I was being neglectful and we were doing nothing.
Yeah, right.
Right? The term unschooling means the lack of doing the thing.
Yeah.
Well,
You're like, I'm so sorry. They're like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I'm just, nothing. We're unschooling the kids. Well, how you unschooling them? Not in a system. I'm sure.
right?
I could just imagine people's perception of like, what is going on right here?
Right?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So we decided to use the term world schooling, and it was just that simple. And I did a search, and there were other people using the term world schooling that were simply unschooling and not traveling, because they felt the same way I did. They were learning from the world around them, whether you're home or traveling or not. But those that were publicly using the term, their objection was the same as mine. I don't want to be called not doing something. I want to really use a term that explains what we are doing. So learning from the world, simple, right? But I took that and started to expand that a little deeper. And I created these sort of definitions and built a community around that, because parents really wanted, number one, to be a part of a community that really resonated and was in alignment with their vision and their desires. And also parents felt the same way I did about the term unschooling. And even though it's still used out there in the world, I prefer to use the sort of active positive definition versus the thing that we're not doing. I don't want to focus on the thing that we're not doing. I'm going to focus on the thing that we're doing because it's rich and meaningful. And now there's a community. I built a community from basically 0 to about 50,000 people. Like,
Wow.
people are interested in this kind of movement. So for me, kind of breathing life and direction and definition to it made it much simpler to build community of families that were interested in traveling and exploring the world so their children can see the world. Well, now there's a community that really affirms that this is legitimate learning, because we got the numbers, right? And a lot of people are doing it.
Well,
So, yeah.
and you obviously know because you've had the experiences, but the when you say there is people that want it, like 50,000, like, let's be real, world schooling, I'm going to make a projection here, is probably it because of how diversified it could be, it becomes too daunting for a lot of people. But if we did a poll, so if people said, do you want to world school your kids, they don't know, right?
Right.
But if we did a poll and we said, does the traditional school system need to be revamped? Well, I think most people would just have their hands in the air.
Right.
It's hard for some, I assume. I'm making an assumption here. I don't know. For me, it wasn't. It's like, it seems like common sense. I assume for some people it's hard to understand because they've the experience they had in their life, they were indoctrinated in a certain kind of way. To say this is, to even try to, I would even suggest to even try to make the comparison to this is the pure natural, this is learning.
This is learning.
School system is remembering and reciting.
And let's get real about the nature of the school system. It's been around for a little over 100 years. It's based off of the Prussian model,
Yep.
which is,
Factory.
exactly, birthed during the Industrial Revolution to produce workers. And that's why there's bells that tell you when to stop, focus on something else, and eat and, whatever, rest.
And well, the thing is, like, when people find out that information, they feel like, I'll suggest, let me talk about me. When I found out that information, I'm like, how could they do that? JP Morgan Chase, John D. Rockefeller, the Carnegie. And I'm like, how could they do that? Really, they were doing a very valuable thing upon that time. We just haven't.
Yes and no.
We just haven't. Well, valuable in the sense of, first of all, of course, yes and no. There has to be both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
They were doing a valuable thing, and this is what society needed at that time to be where we're at today. The industrial age created the next.
Still gonna say yes and no. Yes,
always two sides of the coin. Good.
I feel like the conventional education system is really detrimental to creating a deep love of learning.
Absolutely.
Right?
Period.
Yeah. Like, no more needs to be said. And right, it got us to where we are, but even it continued beyond, because it is a system of indoctrination. And there was a speech where Eleanor Roosevelt was speaking, to some, I don't remember what the context was, but she was speaking to some audience, and she was asked, as the first lady, what is the purpose of education? And she said, simply to create good citizens. And if you pull that apart, this means that the predominant goal is to serve a system instead of to serve the individual. And it should be somewhat even at where we are in the world in terms of our cultural revolution and all that. It should be somewhat even, like the understanding of civic values and morals and all of that stuff. And even mental health should be a part of a system that serves individuals, which then would support the community as a whole. But it's not like that. It's really indoctrination to train workers, to train people to be followers, to train the critical thinking right out of them, to set up a system of rewards and punishment. And rewards and punishment are not growth or learning. They are extrinsic motivators that keep us going after the carrot constantly. And that's not internal satisfaction. If we were taught and exposed to tools for mental health and self-inquiry and normalize the internal worlds as a rich environment for learning, number one, mental health issues would be less than they are in the culture today. And we would have a community of innovators and lots of incredible discoveries and growths. And you may say, well, we've got that already, and look, it's already working. Well, sure, it's working to the scale of which we can see, but we have no idea what people are capable of, because there's a lot of punishment and rewards, authoritarian, rule following, and
You
some
have to do.
okay. But, I'm going to come at this now from a parenting perspective. And I will say flat out, you'll probably recognize this and not be so shocked when I say this I am statement. It's probably pretty obvious, but I do want to explain what it means. Here it is. The I am statement is, I am an anarchist. Are you shocked?
No, but do explain for us.
So anarchy, the term itself, has been misused, and it, in most people's minds, it means chaos, lack of compassion, and just pretty much violence, right? That's what most people think of when they hear the term anarchist. And what its true meaning is somebody who does not follow the edict of an authority just because of the cultural norm. Like, I don't vote. I don't want to play in a system that I feel doesn't serve humanity, or at least the humanity that I bring to the table. I don't think it's good enough to choose for the lesser of two evils. And I've been told all of my life, but you have to, it's your civic duty. My civic duty is to tap in to my core values and recognize the values that I hold dear and live in alignment to that. And I don't need rules for that, because I believe in equality and justice and humanity and connection and kindness. What kind of laws do I need to follow in order to make those things a part of my active experience? I don't. I'm not choosing to follow just because it's been, demanded upon me. And unschooling is a way of really, or world schooling or self-directed learning, which I like to call it now. It's really a way of finding out who you are and why you're here and what passions and purposes you are meant to explore and what gifts you have for the world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, that's an anarchist. Going through a system and keeping your nose to the grindstone and running the hamster wheel. I'm not interested in that. I'm just simply not. And the other thing that I want to make clear about anarchy is all true anarchists believe that my rights end where yours begin. So I will never infringe my belief upon you because you're a sovereign individual and you can choose how you wish to live. So I completely respect all choices, as long as they're not harming another individual or community. I respect people's right to choose how to live. Yeah.
I love it. I think I'll make my projections, if you will. Everything that so I don't know the term like anarchy. I don't know. I don't have much in that community, so literally I had to have you ask like I had to ask like what is that then? Of course we have our preconceived notions, but don't experience. But outside of that, everything that you shared, I'm gonna suggest is um, what comes from ascension.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Once we 100%, I play in the system. I do. And but 100%, I share with people like, the things that we'll just talk about for a moment, we'll use, I'll discuss it in America. So not going outside of America, if we just stayed inside of America, the things that we fight with each other over inside of our country, not even outside of, I tell people, that, when people ask me about sides, there's certain things that if you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. So there's certain things that I stand for, but I keep those very few and far in between, and everything else I'm very flexible on, and I believe it's based on context. And what I
Yeah,
mean,
I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, what I share with people on context, like the example I give, like if my son was yelling in the house and my wife was taking a nap, the knee-jerk reaction is to say that away from energy, don't yell in the house. Well, the dilemma with that, for one, is I try to stay in towards energy. So I try to tell my son, hey, buddy, lower your voice. It's what I want instead of what I don't want. But the other factor is, let's say the next day, mom and dad are taking a nap and there's a fire, but he now knows to don't yell in the house. So,
Right.
so now yelling in the house is contextualized. So now there's actually a time for it and a time not for it. So I've
Yeah.
ascended above one side or the other, is a suggestion. But
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to describe the living up with lack of rules, because you don't really need rules. You need connection and you need values, right? And so if the value is the safety of your family, then the quote unquote rule that you're saying, that you might address it as a rule, yelling in the house or not yelling in the house, is not really valid. But if you're talking about being respectful, then that is yelling in the house. Just because you're yelling and whatever, is that in alignment with the value of being respectful for everybody and yourself? And we make mistakes, and so having the flexibility to actually say, instead of not don't yell in the house, or I wish your voice was lower, approaching it from those two sides also makes a difference. But the value behind it is really about the respect and safety and comfort of this beautiful community that you call your family. That
what
is really different.
I have a question, if you'll, and of course, anything always, all my guests, anything that we not want to talk about, literally, you'll just say pass or whatever the case may be. I have a question. So when we look at anarchy as a community or as a concept or as forgive me if I'm using labels that aren't very appropriate. When we look at, how do you feel about the systems that are all the systems that exist that are like 100 years old, be it school or be it government or whatever it is, that they just need to be overhauled. But I am actually for rules in government.
I'm not.
So right. And there's so it's right. So my question though, my question is, and of course I respect your views, you respect, so then super cool. Like, and that's why we can sit down and
Yeah.
enjoy the conversation. And that's really for everyone listening. The one of the evidence of ascension when you can sit down and do that. And the other piece is I tell people is I'm very open to, because I don't marry one side. There's only a few things. Because I don't, I'm open to sit down with someone on one side of the table and get up on the other.
Yeah, why not? And I,
um,
I could tell you a story about that, but please
the
continue your
Yeah,
question.
so my question would be, at whatever, if you want to answer it all, and at whatever level of abstract or detail, if we were to achieve anarchy in the world, so we had, so if we were to do away with, and so when you said, hey, I believe whatever you want to believe is fine as long as we're not harming others. How do you govern the humans that will harm others in reaction to their trauma?
I don't know how to answer that, but what I do know is when you create an empowered society, generally, generation after generation after generation, that will be left behind. And what an empowered society can look like is opting into systems that they're voluntarily there. So a good example might be like a kibbutz in Israel, where everybody lives in this community. They opt in, they don't have to be there. The structure of the community is voted upon by the members, and they all have a common goal. There are also, and kibbutzes are not the only example. There's many examples around the world. And I get into these philosophical conversations a lot with my son, who is hyper intelligent and very acutely aware of world affairs. And he was raised as an anarchist, but he doesn't self-identify as an anarchist, and he has a very different viewpoint. So we're constantly talking about political theory, and we both believe that the human nature, the human person, but the general human experience does need to evolve. You're calling it ascension. I usually use the word evolution. We're evolving into a higher state of consciousness where we understand that we are pretty much the same person. And that is, life encompasses all of us having these individual experiences. Why are we individuated? Why? What is the purpose? And that is to bring out that spectrum of gifts and serve and contribute and be a part of something greater than ourselves. That's why we're all here on this planet. And I feel pretty firm about that. And I think a lot of the crime and a lot of the harm that happens, I mean, the real simplistic reductionist statement would be hurt people, right? And if there is a culture with no normalization of exploring the internal worlds, then we're gonna always be wearing these things on our sleeves, right? It's going to be a part of how we're walking through the planet. But if it's a kinder, gentler, more accommodating planet in terms of human connection and human relationship, the moment that we start ending these patterns of generational wounds and really focusing on those internal worlds, generation after generation, like I said, we can move into a space where we can self-govern, because we understand that what's best for me is best for you. What's best for you is really what's best for me. And the harm factor hopefully will be bred out of the human experience. I don't know exactly how to get from A to B, right? And my son and I, like I said, we both believe the broad vision could be some form of quote unquote utopia. But that's going to require internal resources evolving, not external.
I agree with the ascension. Thank you. I appreciate this conversation. It is not often that I get to have this deep of conversation on the podcast. So thank you. So I agree with that. Once we have I use label ascension, all of our words just labels. All of our words are sounds. When I say the sound door, as society, we agreed to know what the sound door means. So ascension. Once we when we when we learn who we are,
Mhm.
outside of our trauma responses, outside of all of the things that happen to us, when we heal our generational trauma, we do not need governing.
No.
I would I love to believe, like, I believe in abundance. So I almost started saying immediately, I was like, no, Greg, I actually can't align with that. I won't allow myself to align with, almost to say, like, I think it's impossible to go without government. As soon as you stand up those, forgive me, what was the word for Israel that you shared?
Oh, a
Like
kibbutz.
kibbutz. As soon as you stand that up, that's a government.
You right,
Americans government was stood up in a tavern signing an agreement, and we all agreed. So like when
right.
that kibbutz
There's an
stands like a century later and 2 centuries and 5 centuries later, the human, we are going to have traumas, and then we're gonna have trauma responses, and then
yeah,
and then and then like even once we ascend it, like the journey would be constant reascension, and it's a beautiful thought. Um, but for anyone to produce anything, like when you travel the world, like the people that are flying the plane, they gotta, if they're if they're if they're doing ascension, they might not be flying the plane. I
I
mean,
don't
once they're ascended, but it is I mean, the idea of, for sure, we are as a society definitely too far that way, in terms of we've gotten way too granular.
yeah.
Yeah, way too granular in terms of what we should do and have to do. I self-govern on even saying things like, now I fail plenty for everyone listening. I'm good at it. Um, I self-govern on even utilizing the word have to. If I say, oh, I have to go do these emails, I will stop and re-say it out loud. I'm going to go do these emails.
Mhm.
It's a power of choice. I simply just won't go do these emails if I don't want to.
Yeah,
And when we say we have to, like, we start to cast a neurological effect on ourselves, like something has to be done and we're the one that has to do it, because society has bred into us what we have to do. And we
absolutely.
believe these things. Yeah.
So I'm not anti-government. I'm anti-compulsory participation in government that I don't agree with. I am happy to be a part of any community or organization that I choose to,
Love
right?
that.
And if there is a set of governance that works for this environment and I'm opting in, then I'm opting into all of those systems. So I need to be able to have the ability to choose. So that's where the differentiation between compulsory nature and sort of opt-in voluntary nature of it. Systems do need to be in place, and there needs to be some cooperation and collaboration, right? And it takes time. Um, I'm just going to tell you a teeny little story.
Please.
When my son was 13, we were living in Peru, high in the Andes, and we loved our adventure. And he didn't want to go back to the States, but he started as an adolescent, really desiring having social connection, because biologically, it's a time where they're individuating, and social learning is a massive aspect of the developmental stage in adolescence. And where we were, it just wasn't serving him. And so together, we've co-founded a company, as you read in my bio, called Project World School. And we started to bring teens to different places in the world to live in community. And one of the structures that we put in place was, number one, everything is consensual. And
Mm.
so nothing is forced upon anybody. And there must be a consensus to do everything. And that doesn't mean majority wins like a democracy, because that means some people's voices are not heard. It just means more people's voices are heard. But this is much more difficult. And if you can imagine a group of 15 teenagers all having to agree to the thing that we're doing tomorrow. And every night we would sit down and do our circle and have our conversation. Here's what's on the schedule. Here's what the plans are. Does everybody want to do this, or would we prefer to do something else? And conversations ensue. So one person doesn't want to do it. We don't do it. It's that much power in one person. But we're going to work and sit in this circle until we have a consensus. And sometimes that means cooperation, exercising those skills of cooperation, collaboration. Sometimes you make a, what's the word I'm looking for? I hate it when the word just goes, flies out.
It'll come right back.
It'll come back. What is that word? When you do something and you don't really want to do it, compromise. Sometimes that's the only option, because a lot of times it's very difficult to come to a consensus. But the more you practice it, the more you exercise those skills, and the more each individual who makes up part of the group has like skin in the game. It's ownership. And so the experiences that we have together are not just somebody dragging another person. It is what I call partnership. And this is how I parent, partnership parenting. It's a side-by-side experience, which means we got everybody's back if they fall. And if we fall forward, somebody can catch us there too. But we're all in this together. And that is really powerful. So we need more experiences like that, so that when we get into a situation, we can say, here's my boundary. No, this does not work for me. And I do not consent, because this is not in alignment with my highest self or my goals or my core values. And let's have a conversation.
So obviously, Laine, you chose this consciously. So powerful. Big takeaways that I had in there. You're teaching communication at one of the deepest levels. You're teaching how to negotiate, how to compromise. I've made suggestions before. Could we actually ever achieve it? I don't know. But I think communication goes much deeper than at some level. I'm going to have to assume that but goes a lot deeper than what most people are realizing. And when you really get in the depths of proper communication, I've suggested before, and will we ever get there? Probably not. But proper communication will solve every single war.
It could.
You're teaching all those kids how to solve every war that could have came up.
Also, let's not forget the brilliance and value of travel. You can't drop bombs on somebody if you've met them. You just can't. It's the humanity connection. Yeah.
Well, it's really cool at that young age, like teaching them, like, hey, you want this, and someone else or the community wants this. Like, how do we, like, the truth is, I'm gonna suggest. I mean, I'm just gonna. These are one of the things I'll marry and stand on. I'm gonna suggest there's always a middle ground. Someone might not agree what it looks like on their side, but there's always some type of I'm of the belief of abundance. So I'm of the belief of everything being possible. So if everything's possible, then there's got to be a compromise. And you're teaching them that without saying it, because in order for to move forward, we have a compromise.
Yeah.
Now their conditioning is there's always a compromise. Go ahead. Forgive me.
Well, one of the tools and skills that I actually facilitate not only on the Project World School trips, but in our transformative mentoring for teens is unpacking the idea surrounding worldviews. Now,
Mm,
worldviews are the lenses in which we see the world through. And in our travels, we've brought teens to different places. And I'd love to share this example if it's okay.
please, please.
Okay, so like in Ecuador, we did a trip in Ecuador, and we worked with the first group that we worked with was the Pacific Whale Foundation, and they were caretakers and guardians of the oceans, and they scientifically recorded the migration of the whales from the north to the south, and it was really fantastic project. And their worldview was really about the ecological soundness of the ocean, right? Understood. Then we worked with a group of school children there, and we did some volunteer work there, and we cleaned up the beaches, and we did a lot of really interesting things. And their worldview was, this is my home, this is my environment, and this is a place to play, and this is where we grow and learn and laugh and so forth. Simple. Then we met and worked with a group of fishermen that would go out every morning and come back on the same beaches every afternoon where the children would play. And they chop the heads off the fish and throw the bloody carcasses right there on the shore. And the cats and the dogs would come, and there was, fish blood guts everywhere. And it was just how things were done. And their relationship or worldview to that environment was, this is a place where I can create commerce and feed my family and provide for the community. And those are three different worldviews. And here we were, a group of teenagers, well, not me, but a group of teenagers having this experience. And we brought our own individual worldviews to that, all three of those experiences. And what the instructions were not to judge which is more important, but to find the value without wanting to change any individual worldview and integrate that into a grander worldview that now represents this beautiful place in Ecuador. Yeah.
It was powerful. It was so powerful. If we taught that, we would definitely have a massive, I've said sentences before, which encompasses what you're saying, that the more we travel, the less ignorant we become.
Exactly.
We have this tiny model of the world that we live in, and we just think it's everything. I had a buddy shared a story with me the other day I'll share real quick.
Yeah.
He was he couple neighbors down, a couple houses down, his neighbor, he tells me a story. His husband and wife, it was an older couple, and the husband, sadly, out of pretty much out of nowhere and pretty quickly, Alzheimer's he has Alzheimer's, and it consumes him very quickly. So one day, my buddy, he's over there at the house, and he's helping fix something at the house because he knows that the husband is a little bit under the weather of normal condition. So he fixed whatever it is, and he tells me, he says, every time he goes out of the house, the screen door whap would just come slamming, and he'd go and he'd get whatever he needed and go in there, whap, the slammed, and he thought, man, this poor lady. And so he went home and got all the tools he needed and came back, hardware store, whatever, and came back and he fixed the door. And he tells you, he says, hey, I fixed your door. And she said, what door? And he said, the front door. And she said, what do you mean? And he said, oh, come here, I'll show you. So he opens the door, and the door gently closes. And she said, can you unfix it? And he said, well, yeah, it's slammed. It was slamming really hard. She said, that's how I know if my husband gets out. Model of the world. We create the meaning for what we see, and that meaning is a meaning. But until we contextualize that situation, that might not be the appropriate meaning.
Appropriate, I kind of have a challenge with that word.
Oh, please. I might have said it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the appropriate meaning, it's just one meaning. It's
I
just one
agree.
perspective. That's all. It's just a perspective, right? And the more that you are aware of your internal worlds, you know what rings true for you. So I know that equality and kindness and respect, all that is so important. And I try and run every single action and every word that I speak through those filters. Is what I'm saying or going to do or interaction, is that in alignment with my values? But I have to know those things, right?
Hmm.
I have to. And that's part of my son and I. We went through an actual formal exercise of how to define our core values and use it as a tool. So he defined his, I defined mine. Together, then we took those and created a set of family core values that were sort of a hybrid, and created new values. And every time we had a decision to make, in our travels or creating a business or whatever, we would run it through the
Does it?
values. We didn't need the rules, and he didn't need a rule to quote unquote behave. And behavior is a whole nother can of worms that we don't have time to talk about. But maybe we could have another conversation.
Yeah, if you would like, we'll definitely bring. I love this realm of things. I've been on my self discovery journey for about 10 years. About 12 years. About 12 years. It started to really get deep, I would say, within the last 4 years, and really began to get very deep in the last, say, like 2.5 years of learning all of learning the ones I've learned so far, all the lenses that we carry and that we think are a real thing, and they're real because we're holding them, but we can also just put them down, and then they're really not there too.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. I love everything. I love the everything you said. I fully agree. I appreciate. Thank you for. Um, I appreciate you giving the shout out to. Well, is it appropriate? Well, it's just a version. I think that's very important. I think there are some inherent truths, but I think they're very fewer than we ever considered.
Yeah.
Like, I think love is an inherent truth,
I,
but a lot of things that go past that, we've just decided what is right or wrong. There's a lot less inherent rights and wrongs than we sometimes evaluate.
yeah, I agree.
Well, Lainey, let me thank you so much for being on. This has been an incredible conversation. We are definitely of the same wavelength as far as raising the vibrational frequency of society. I would love to have you back on because
Love it.
of the depths that we can go on this esoteric information. This stuff, again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. For the people that have begun to see it or have already saw it, you know what we're talking about. For the people that are like, what are they doing? Hang in there. Keep reading books. Keep listening to the podcasts. The more you open your eyes, the more free your journey becomes, and it's really incredible. The more you can align with love. Um, Lainey, would you do me a favor? I have my guest share a message. I asked kind of my guests to do like a final thought. Would you share a message for let's say maybe mother, but let's say parent, if you want to be mother, if you're more comfortable in that realm, but for a parent that is already like they've begun to realize that the old system's not working, and they've begun to realize that they're looking for something different, and that okay, can you share a message with them on whatever you're called to share, grounding them, and what you're called to share with them in creating confidence for them as they move forward in their journey?
Sure. Well, if you are feeling out of alignment with being a part of a system that's not working for you, meaning it feels restrictive, it feels authoritarian, it feels like you're constantly having to live by somebody else's rules. Trust yourself that that kind of dissatisfaction is your internal heart's message telling you this is not in alignment, and your voice Your experience on this planet is so important. And the second thing is, in your parenting, you can take this really micro if you want. If you hear the words coming out of your mouth that are really commonly said in modern culture, like, do it because I said so, because I'm the parent, that kind of authoritarian message. Listen for those things coming out of your mouth. And if that doesn't feel right for you and you say it anyway, become a parent who gets in the habit of pausing before you speak. Pause and think about and ask yourself this question. Is the thing that I'm going to say or do, is this meant to create greater connection, or is it meant to coerce in some way? And most parenting, and we'd even talk about conscious parenting or partnership parenting or any of that other stuff, but most parenting techniques that people pick up books and read, it's about changing the behavior of their children. Well, guess what? That's still a manipulation, even if you do it with a kind voice or in a gentle tone or in a peaceful manner. You are still manipulating the will of another sovereign human being. And that, to me, is authoritarian parenting. Come to a place where you can find partnership, because the side-by-side journey is so much more powerful than dragging somebody in a direction that you want them to be in. Because remember, our children are only young for such a short period of time. And because I raised my son in partnership in such a really fulfilling way, we are so incredibly close. He's 24. I see him all the time. He lives in the same town as me here in Mexico. And our relationship is so beautiful. Everybody comments on it like, oh my God, it's so crazy to see you guys together. But we are just so connected and bonded. And that's really what we want as parents.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Laine.
Of
And
course.
one more before we get out of here. The title of your book. Would you give us the title of your book one more time?
Sure. It's called Seen, Heard, and Understood: Parenting and Partnering with Teens for Greater Mental Health. It just came out. Well, the original came out a little over a year ago, but the anniversary edition, which is a hardcover, came out just a couple weeks ago, actually. And I've got 6 new tools in there. There's chapters that contain everything from partnership parenting to facilitating to mental health, psychology, neurobiology, so you understand the stages that your children are experiencing and how you can actually perceive how you experienced it as a child yourself. And because any need that wasn't met inside of you when you were growing up, you're going to get triggered when your child does the same thing. So that's your wound. That's your stuff to deal with. And then there's a whole chapter of tools. And like I said, the new anniversary edition has 6 new tools added to the book. So
That's
pick it up
incredible.
on Amazon. Yeah.
And
Thanks.
for everyone listening, if you're just listening to us on audio, you can go to Success After Trauma's YouTube channel. You can watch the video. You get to see Laine's beautiful face, but she also held up the book so you can see the cover of the book as well. Go ahead and get a copy on Amazon. And before we get out, one last thing, Laine, the people that have connected with you,
Yeah.
the women, the mothers, the parents, or just the humans that are like, that's the energy, I need to talk to her. What's the next step for them? How do they reach out to you? How do they connect with you?
Well, if it's an adult, a parent that is interested in working on their own partnership and transforming their family culture, you can reach me through partnershipparenting.com. And there's more information about that. But my primary focus is really working with teens. I do work with like 10% of my clientele are parents, and I don't take on that many parents. And my son and I also co-teach some parenting classes in partnership. But my primary focus and primary clientele are teens or young adults or tweens. So I teach them skills for greater mental health by facilitating tools that are theirs to use throughout life. The moment that teens start recognizing that their inner worlds are really important and that they have access to them anytime, there's no way you can live a superficial life anymore. So you can, if you have a teen, young adult, or tween that would thrive in some mentorship or in one of my online courses, you can find that information at Transformative Mentoring for Teens. And then for our trips, we're only doing about 2 a year now, down from 5, which was pre-pandemic. You can find out more information about our teen trips, international trips at Project World School.
Project World School. I love it. And for everyone, again, if you're listening in the audio, you can check us out on YouTube. If you're watching us, you can download us on your favorite podcast streaming platform, listen to the audio. But check us out on YouTube. We're going to have those links for you, hyperlinks. You can just click on them, gather more information, and connect with Laine, who I am excited to have again in the future. We'll have to dive more deeper into conscious parenting, but I love your energy. I love the conversation. I love the rawness. This is a really great episode, and thank you so much, Laine.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for hosting. And thank you for putting these conversations out in the world. It's so needed.
Absolutely. Until the next episode, be great. It's already in you.